Hey folks, it's Jeremy Kirkland. You're listening to Blamo. How you doing? Oh man, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm doing pretty good. I spent the evening ripping CDs. Yes, I've been going and I'm buying physical media because I love it. I love it. I got a bunch of great CDs, some records I hadn't heard in a while, and they were a couple bucks because I take my kids to the thrift stores, and yeah, I'm like, check it out, kids. We're gonna listen to Graceland. We're listening to Hootie and the Blowfish. I got all the good stuff, and I was like, man, I gotta rip this music lossless because I need the highest quality hi-fi. Even though I get it before an audiophile texts me, I understand 16-bit, 44. Like, we're good. I know I can't get 24-bit off these CDs. Okay. Anyway, I love music, but I'll tell you, I love this podcast. And I love you because I love you. Okay. I'm excited about today's pod, man. First off, for those that wanted more deep shoe talk, we got it. We got the goods. And second, lots of stuff happening right now in the life of old Jer Bear. We got some good stuff. I'll be honest, we got some bad stuff, but we manage. We get up every day and we put our pants and our effing loafers on. Where my loafy heads? Because this was a fun pod. Wyatt Gilmore, founder of Grant Stone, joins me to talk about how he got started in footwear, the family history that shaped his point of view, and the years he spent learning the business inside factories in China and Taiwan. Oh man, we get into quality, construction, the myths people still carry about where things are made. I'm guilty too. It's all right. We got to admit it. And what actually matters when you're making a great shoe. We also talk about loafers, suede, shell cordovan. I mean, all the things. Big love for the loafies. Why some products become grails and what it means to build a brand without shouting. Take note. This was a good one. Yeah, and look, I'll just be honest. I'm not going to bury the lead, but I did. We tease a little something about what we've been working on together. Yep, a little upcoming Blamo Grant Stone collab. You'll hear it. It's all in there. I love y'all. Here we go. Thanks a lot for making the time to do this. I know you just wrapped your guys' little spring break vacation. How was that?
It was good. We went down to Georgia. Honestly, just a little quick Airbnb thing for a few days, and we've got some Asia trips coming up. My wife, she's going to Taiwan for a week with her friend here in like a week or two, so I have to watch the kids, and then like she'll be back for like a week and a half, and then we're going all together to Taiwan and then China, like with the family and all that stuff. So it was like, for spring break, let's do something like either nothing at all or something that's like very, very simple. And so we went to the Appalachian Mountains and just kind of hung out Airbnb, you know.
Yeah. Okay, all the Asia trips, how often do you go?
Man, it's kind of hit or miss. I mean, 1 to 2 times a year to China specifically, you know, to the factory and stuff. I mean, last year, kind of last minute, 1 week trip to Japan and China and stuff. And like this year, probably 1 or 2 times, you know.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and when you're there, how long do you go?
I usually go for like really short periods, unless my kids are going and stuff, and then which is like once a year. So like last year, I mean, I went to Japan for 2 days, went to China to the factory for 4 days, and flew home. You know, and so
like you don't even adjust the jet lag, anything?
Yeah, I mean, you get over the jet lag for like a day or two, and then you fly back. Yeah.
Oh, why? That sounds awful.
It's not great. It's not great, but it's like you can get it all done in 1 week, and it's like, hey, it's kind of nice. You know, I'd rather do that than like hang out for an extra 3 days or whatever. It's like, now let's just go, you know, and then get back, you know, a little easier.
Yeah.
Especially with kids and stuff.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, for me, having to travel with knowing that my kids are at home, while I love it in the sense that I'm flattered and grateful to be able to do what I do for a living or travel or, you know, whatever, fill in the blank, right? But my kids are similar to yours in that they're old enough that like they're aware when I'm gone, and it messes with things at home, and you know, and I don't know, a part of me feels bad, and so you're just like, well, this is
for sure.
This is all I can do. What do you want?
Yeah. Exactly. Just make a little shorter trip and best I can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about Grant Stone. I
Yeah.
think, you've been on Stitch Down, you've been on a few other pods, but um, for me, Grant Stone, it's a brand I've always loved. You guys make incredible stuff, but I do want to talk a tiny bit about kind of the origins of this stuff. So, for starters, the elephant in the room we have to confront because there's always people ask about the Alden connection or what that is. So, could you kind of explain or dispel this rumor or whatever it is?
No, I mean that was my grandpa's career. I mean, he spent his primary, 60 something years with Alden. So he was the North, well, I guess the East Coast territory, and Midwest, and so he was there for a very long time. That was his whole life, and he loved that. And loved the company and the people there, and so that was like a big part of that side of the family, and my dad worked there also for something like 12 to 18 years, maybe 14, 16 years, something like that. And he took over that, like that Midwest territory that my grandpa had at some point. And so that's how he ended up over here, in Michigan and stuff. And so that's pretty much it. I mean, I never worked at Alden and stuff because that was back. Even my dad, when he probably stopped working there in the 80s. But in my grandpa, I mean, he worked there until deep into the 2000s, 2010, something like that. So a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, I had met Floyd in. I mean, when I was working at the Armory, he had set up our Armory account. Like he came and visited the store, and cruised on in, looked around, kind of gave it a sign off, and then explained to us, which it was just like a treat to have him come and visit. I mean, especially he'd been in the industry so long, and for us, getting in. At the time, like getting an Alden account was the equivalent of like, okay, you finally made it. But yeah, I remember because you and I think that's probably when we met a little bit around there, and you were like, oh yeah, like you kind of explained the Alden family connection. And I know that at the time too, because like people were like, oh, is this, are you guys owned by Alden? Is it this? So like, what kind of inspired you to make Grant Stone, despite like the whole family connection, or maybe not going into the Alden biz?
Well, that my dad had already been kind of removed from it. And so my grandpa, he was going to be for sure like lifelong. That was going to be his career and his place. That's for sure. And so, I mean, that was kind of his path. But, I was never really on that path specifically because I went to China in 2010. And so I started working for that family over there, at the factory in China. And so, I was never really in that lane necessarily. And so I was just more or less kind of learning in China from the development sourcing side of things, and then the manufacturing side for the brands that we were making in the factory. And so that was kind of, my direction from the get-go, staying, with that factory and that family over there.
Yeah. And what led you to that from before?
Well, I mean, honestly, I was, would have been just graduating from high school and before going to college. So, my dad knew this family, in Taiwan and China, and worked with them in the past. And I mean, he'd worked with them for many years, since starting in the 90s.
Wow.
And so kind of had the opportunity to, like, I was in between things, before going to, deciding whether to go to college, what to do, all this stuff, it's 18, 19 years old. And, my parents were just like, well, going over to China, at least, spending 2-3 weeks, that'd be quite the opportunity just for an experience, just to see Taipei, just to see Xiamen. If you have the opportunity, you should definitely do that. You just spend a few weeks over there to check it out. And so then I did. And while I was there, the factory owner just basically said, hey, do you want to stick around for a few months and see if there's something that you would like to do here, with us? I mean, it was kind of towards the tail end of my dad's career, and he was kind of, somewhat retired at that point. And so it was kind of like, hey, is there something that, this you'd be interested in and kind of sticking around and checking it out? And I said, yes. Stayed for, those few months and canceled tickets and all that stuff. And then just ended up staying 8 or 9 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So just, it was just really that family giving me the opportunity to just, because they didn't have anything necessarily. They're just like, well, you can kind of do what your dad used to do and, kind of be the in between for us in the customer, and you can kind of learn the sourcing and manufacturing side, and of course that was kind of, a year or 2 years in, and then all of a sudden, yeah, just kind of, as I just lived there long term, that just kind of became my role.
So so you basically moved there and then stayed there.
Yeah. Once I won in 2010, I did come back. I think, came back for Christmas, I think, a year or 2 later and stuff for, a week, but I ended up living there for, 9 years, something like that.
And this sounds really trite, but I think it's important to try to distinguish this. What were some of the things that culturally that you really loved about it that maybe doesn't exist here?
Well, I think that was half the reason that I ended up staying, was just because, being a young person and also kind of like living in the Midwest. And then I lived in the South, like Georgia, Florida border for some years and stuff. Like, it was just so unique every single step of the way from the culture and everything else that, like, I think that was half the draw. It was just exciting, so different. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things there. I mean, to start, I would say it's pretty dependent, I think, on where you live in China or Taiwan, but being in Taipei and then also in Xiamen, all the way in the southeast side, being a small island, I mean, it's pretty beautiful. And then there's also like a college there, a university, the Xiamen University. And so it's a lot of the industrial zone and everything else had shrunk down quite a bit. And so it's pretty small. So it's just a lot of, there's a pretty good amount of expats there considering for how small the place is, but then also just, it's beautiful. It's on the ocean. You have a, very hot, humid, basically tropical climate. So it was just a very unique situation, I guess, for, as far as like, if you had to compare it versus like, okay, living in Shenzhen or Dongguan or something like that, it's a different aspect, comparing to those couple cities. But so that part was pretty interesting. But culturally, it was very welcoming, especially for someone my age. But I think a lot of that falls on the factory. They were just, kind of treated me as their own. Plus, I, knew nothing and couldn't speak Chinese when I got there. So they basically had to treat me like I was a child. And they looked at me that anyways, because I was, 19, 20 years old. And so, yeah, with their help, yeah, just learned a lot. And basically, that, the factory at the time was Monday through Saturday. So basically spending majority of the time at the factory and then, stayed in one of the factory condos there. And so it's just pretty much full on spending time there and, and created really, great relationships with, the folks in the office and then obviously the people there. And so it's just like, yeah, it just became, my family, so like for Chinese New Year's and stuff, I'm just staying there half the time for the American holidays, staying there and celebrating there with, whether it's my colleagues or the factory owner and his family and so on. So pretty unique situation, I think,
Yeah. It sounds like it was almost like I don't know, like we'd call it like a foreign exchange program, but then you were there a very long time. Did you learn the language?
Yeah, it took me like 3-4 years to like start taking it a little more seriously because I was like, I thought I would kind of catch on, but I didn't really. It was just like that difficult, I felt like at the time. And so I started taking, I got a tutor. I started going to school like, in the evenings for a few days a week, probably like my 3rd or 4th year in for probably 3 years, And so after like 3-4 years of that, so, my 6th, 7th year, that's kind of when, everything kind of all clicked and stuff and made it much easier,
So now, in terms of your relationship with them, you're based back in the States. When you're chatting with the factory and your partners, you're just conversing in Cantonese? Excuse my ignorance.
Yeah, no, Mandarin Chinese. Yep.
Oh, okay, Mandarin Chinese. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't know. I had no idea about that, and I think it's also important for listeners to really distinguish it versus you're not like some random brand that said, "Oh, we want to make shoes," and then you guys went and looked up a factory online. Like there's a very, very long, strong connection, and even on your site and stuff and on your products, I mean, it says, proudly made. I'm curious because I do think, especially with footwear, there is a sometimes purposeful, but usually like an accidental snobbery of made in America shoes. And I'll say this, as a person whom, for me, my whole life in fine footwear was either like Alden or Edward Green, right? I had a few custom options. I had a few bespoke options. I will go on the record and say that every MTM shoe I've ever owned was a complete tire fire. I mean, just horrendous. It was painfully difficult. How people fit you is different. You name it, right? I'm not saying that all experiences are bad, but for me, all 8 different experiences I had making made-to-measure shoes were not ideal. And so I preferred just a standard, ready-to-wear shoe. But in my head, I was like, oh, I need, English-made or American-made. And I would invest more and more of my time and looking and getting things, whether it was Alden or whatever. And I saw a decline. Like I have Alden shoes, from 2010, and they're great. I have Alden shoes from 2018, and there is a significant visible difference in the quality. And this is not like some large conspiracy theory, but I was witnessing the decline in this, versus everyone was buying the name and weren't entirely buying the quality and the construction. They just assumed, So, I'm curious about that because when people, unfortunately, will think made in China or whatever, they're just going to be like, oh, it's not as good, or I don't have, the value isn't there, or whatever. So, like, I'm curious when you guys talk about Grant Stone and the quality of what you're making, how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for the first few years, it's very difficult, if you kind of tout your own product or construction, it doesn't really mean too much, right? I mean, especially until your product's out there and people get their hands on it. And I think it took a lot of years for people to receive the product, to purchase it, receive it, and then just post about it, I mean, and we still get a lot of that today as far as, the feedback online, kind of the unfiltered feedback and the good and bad that comes with it. Ultimately, we really relied on that, over the years. I mean, truth be told, that it just took like the average consumer or just, our customers to go online and kind of share their experience, because I think other people will kind of, they'll consider that a lot more than, we sit there and say, yeah, handmade, Goodyear welted, best linings, best uppers. Like, what does that even mean? What is that stuff? So it's like, I think it just takes a lot of time for people to, kind of put their own information out there, and then customers, it resonates with them, and I think the same way, like in Alden, I think even today, I mean, their product is good. It's just, the same thing that anyone deals with, what we deal with, cutting leathers, cutting linings, cutting uppers. Every single pair is different. And just,
what do you mean every single pair is different?
Just the weld stitches. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a day like today, the person who's doing our customer service, she'll be like, hey, this is the feedback from this person on this, and, complaints on look at this weld stitch, or, look at this weld joint, or, look at these creasing. However, yeah, maybe you and I know that, a $1,600 pair of calf, ready to wear English shoes may have the same issue. And things like that, are part of the product. But of course, there's a window there. There's certain gray area too where some things aren't good, and we have those for sure too. But I think it just takes time. It just takes time to like build that up, and I think the brands that have that base, it just took a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, I'll say, as a person who's been over there and I've seen factories in China, and I've seen factories in America, I've seen factories in Europe, I've seen factories in China. And even the term factory means different things to people depending on where you say the factory is located, right? Like, and there is I feel like especially American consumers, we've been so more or less brainwashed in ways where it's like, oh, an American factory equals this top tier, fill in the blank, whatever thing you want to say that's going to add this kind of luster and polish, and then a factory overseas is not going to equal this. And there's going to be this and this. And in my experience of the factories that I had been to, I was shocked by an order of magnitude how much better some of these factories were overseas, whether it was Hong Kong, China, and I saw not how good the machines were, but also how good the individuals were in terms of taking the utmost care of the product that they were making. And so again, I'm not, I'm speaking specifically about luxury goods. I mean, there's a reason Visvim moved their shoemaking factory over to China and not Japan. And not an official quote, as I would not appreciate me saying that, but they're like, yeah, the hands are better. The quality is better, And so I think we have less of that now. But for me, one of the most important things in this conversation was to really communicate to others too, where it's like the whole Chinese manufacturing thing is kind of complete bullshit. And it actually turns into a bit of racism, let's be honest, where you just assume that some of these things are, less than because of where they're from. But my experience with Grant Stone, my experience with, say, Viz shoes, etc., I'm always like, holy hell, this is just so good.
Yeah, and I think another way to kind of, sometimes if I'm sitting here have a conversation, even with, someone, let's say here locally, or, a neighbor or something like that, who's not really in this world, I think a way that or an explanation that almost resonates with people a little bit more than me saying, oh, factories in China or these other countries can make, good things too. It's almost like, the product it's just an end result of what you're putting into it. And I think, over the years, of course, these Asian countries get a certain reputation because the customer, meaning the Western customer going there, is speccing and sourcing down to the last detail of what needs to be in that product. And they have a very, very specific idea of what it needs to be down to the penny. And this is the product, and this is how it needs to be done. And so, I mean, it really, at the end of the day, it comes down to what's the goal. And when someone says, well, they're making this cheap thing or whatever, well, it sounds like that was exactly their goal, is to make that product for that price point using those components and et cetera. And then you have other brands that say that, whether that's, it could be a t-shirt. You're going to have other t-shirts that cost more coming out of this country. And it's, well, why? Well, it's because the volume's less. It's a better material, et cetera. So, I mean, it's very, very specific as to why these products are built the way they're made. And at the end of the day, I mean, if anything, if the only thing I learned, being on the factory side is, I mean, you're just doing the best you can to make what the customer needs with every single hurdle possible. You have to build it within this box. And so, at the end of the day, I think a lot of countries can make a nice Gucci-welted shoe, but they have to have a team that's willing to be super flexible, ready to be a total pain in the ass to every single, every single supplier they work with, because you're going to be asking for 400 square foot of this leather, 400 square foot of that from France, 500 square foot of this lining from the US or Italy or France, X amount of yards of welt from Massachusetts. It's like it's tiny, tiny numbers, and it's a pain all the way down to your supplier level of what they're making for you. And so, it's just such a unique little niche that like there's good reason why there's more brands doing this stuff. I mean, it's just tiny quantities in a very, very small market, and so there's only a certain handful of Northampton factories that do it, only a handful in North America that still do it today. And it's hard for everybody. It's hard for everybody to do that. There's no way around it. And so it's like, I think these other manufacturers, I know you're more into like, especially, menswear side of things, whether it comes to tailoring and things like that. It's like, well, where are some of the best tailors? Maybe that's more, Italy and things like that, where it's like, it's not that, other places can't do it. It's just maybe that hasn't been, necessarily part of the journey for the last 30, 40 years. That's just where like Italy, it's like, that's what they do. That's what they do. Of course you could do it in the US, and people try and people do it in the US, and that's okay too. But it's like, I just think all of this stuff is very, very, especially at this level, we're talking about menswear, whether we're talking about, apparel or footwear, and we're talking about not even the 1%. It's like the 0.001% of these products are, your listener who's buying a $1,200, sport coat. And it's like, that's on the low end of ready to wear at this point for a sport coat. And it's like, not many people are doing it because it's freaking hard, and they're tiny quantities. And it's a small market. Like it's just, this isn't, people like to think it's like the 1% or the 10%. It's like, it's not even close to that, especially on the footwear side, right? I mean, it's like, this is such small numbers. There's a reason why, there's more people doing it,
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things you touched on, which, I want to call out more is, a Goodyear welted machine doesn't matter where it's located, right?
Sure.
You can, it's about is the person that's operating it with care, and are they doing a good job, wherever that is. And I think that's a really important thing to distinguish, because earlier you had talked about, where like tailoring's made, right? Or tailoring in Italy or something. And it's funny to me because even the tailors will be like, well, one, we can't find, Italy historically has an emigration problem into which younger Italians want to leave and not take up more, regular, I would say the trade, right? And so
blue collar jobs, things like that.
Yeah. And a lot of the people that are making the tailored suits, like I remember going to Liverano's factory, and it's, you had Eastern European folks, folks from Asian, South Asian, other different types of countries. And so, in this almost globalized society, I think that, and this is something that's just so important for me, is to be like, does it really matter? Like, let's look at the product, let's look at the care that's put into it, and also recognize that, like you were just saying too, the stuff that you're putting, and that's a part of Grandstone shoes. You got leather from France, you got leather, you got stuff from the US, you got, there's so many different parts from all over the world to make this and make it special. And I think for us, sometimes we just view, some sort of like Pinocchio wood shop of an old cobbler just sitting there by himself and it's just like, that's impossible. And if you want that, sure, you can pay 10 grand for a shoe.
Yeah. And I think it goes a long ways. As the years go on, especially as you're a consumer and you buy more things and you're looking for things and you're seeking out certain items, you just kind of see how that stuff works. And I do, generally speaking, I completely support, like American made brands and products and things like that, because I think it's not so much about like the color of the passport of the person making it. Maybe a little bit more so, generally speaking, for someone to do something in the States, it just has to be somewhat of a better quality to a certain extent. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to survive to begin with because the price point naturally is not going to be competitive, so they have to try everything and they have to try to make a better, great product. And so to me, it's a little bit more like, well, it's kind of like a car situation where it's like, well, if you want a cool sports car, or, maybe you want this SUV that you think is very, it's amazing from the 90s or whatever. It's like, you could be looking at a Toyota. You could be looking at a German sports car manufacturer or whatever. And it's not like because, you only want to buy from this one country. It's like, well, this country did really good things in this era for this type of product. And then this country did really unique things. And, the Shelby Cobras and Dodge Vipers had their own day in America, right? Like,
oh, Dodge Viper. Yeah.
I mean, like some of the coolest cars ever made. Right. And so it's like, it's a little bit maybe, but I think it's, and seeing, I have some friends and things that are making products here in the US, and they're doing all of the right things. And I think that's also very like commendable, because it's like at the same time, they have to be at a certain, it depends on the product you're making, but
sure,
to even make it, even consider it as a business model, it has to be on the better creative side of things to even start to do it here. You're going to use better components, everything else, because you're not going to put cheap components into it, with the labor costs, everything else, and just even try to compete, right? It has to be, something good. And so I think, just a little bit more about like what's in the product, what's the final package. And, I think that tells kind of the full story, versus, where it's made and stuff. It depends on what you're buying, I guess,
Well, I agree. And I really appreciate you hanging with me on that, because for me, it's so important to try to explain that more for people, because I think we are accidentally, completely biased to our own, stereotypes that get put into our head. And I think sometimes we almost, especially as we get older, we refuse to explore where they came from and why that means, and if that's still true, So, with Grant Stone and what you guys have been doing, when you had first launched, for me, you were essentially like a boot company, no?
I think once our name got out there a little bit more, but actually when we started, it was 7 shoes. It was 7 shoes, all in leather soles. It was like a plain toe Bluchers and long wings. But it was really, it was pretty homegrown at that point. It had like 2 patterns, one last. And so not that it wasn't like the most well thought out thing, but we really like tiptoed into it, because at the same time, I wasn't like full time. And it was just, myself when we started. It's like, hey, I'm going to make up a handful of styles and send them to a family friend in Connecticut. And they said they would help ship the pairs if we sold one. And so, it took a good like 6 months before it was like, okay, this could actually be something, because that was when Shopify and everything started to go kind of mainstream. And so anyone could kind of like start their own store and make it pretty, user friendly to like get something off the ground and running. But, so it was actually more that, but then as soon as we introduced our first boot or two, like those first patterns, they quickly became the best sellers. Like it wasn't even really close. And honestly, over the last 10 years, only the last 2 or 3 have like loafers and shoes started to level up a little bit and started to catch up to the boots. I think probably just a lot of like, probably part of the trend for, first of all, but then also there's a lot more brands making boots in general than shoes, and so I'm sure the trend is maybe a little bit more so that, and then that's the product of having all of these boot brands. But then, now the shoes seem to be, they're holding their own a little bit more. And so now we still have more boot patterns in general, I'd say, but, I think the loafers and shoes, they're coming around a little bit. But even like our shoes, we don't have a lot of options for like true like business casual dress shoes. So we don't have a lot of Oxfords, short wing tips, or, a lot of like semi brogues and things. Our stuff's a little bit more casual. I think our best selling shoe is like a waxed Commander, leather on like a lug sole, like a plain toe Blucher, or it's a Chrome XL plain toe Blucher with like a leather outsole, like kind of a unique, not mainstream style, like shoes for like business casual, or for like, the person who has to go to the office, and they're pretty casual makeups and stuff. So, and part of that is just because we've had a hard time with the dress products. I mean, I think it was, especially, I mean, the whole COVID scenario there from 20 to 23, Oxfords and things they were not moving very well for us, and so naturally we were doing a little bit more of like that business casual or very casual, plain toe shoe, or even a long wing with a studded sole on it or something like that. Did better, which, I mean, I wouldn't have started with something like that out of the gates,
Yeah, I mean, but I think it also goes to show that the for me, the Grant Stone guy is a menswear guy. They're familiar with other brands. They're, you're not and I love this, like, you're not some Shark Tank brand. You're not some thing where it's like, oh, we did this and we did it better, and we, and you spend a stupid amount of money on like a really tacky, social media campaign and stuff. Like, no, I mean, you guys have always been pretty quiet in a good way, and you're not like screaming all your stuff from a megaphone. And also, I think for me as a person where, I came from the message board era where, you'd essentially do 2-3 weeks of research on a product before you even touched it, right? Like, let's just be honest. And so, you guys were on that too. And so, one, you engaged with everyone really, really well, where you talked about how things fit. And then you did all these like crazy makeups. Like, I'm not surprised with the Chrome XL stuff, because it was stuff that you couldn't get at, fill in the blank sort of department store that's selling a business casual shoe. All the stuff that you guys were making were also just really cool looking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we also had the luxury of being so small that, hey, if, 36 pairs is successful type of mindset, over the years, like,
yeah.
And so then that really allows you to do something like that, because if the mindset is, hey, we have to do this triple digit or, 4-digit number of a product.
Yeah.
It's impossible to make these products, you just can't do that, because you'll never sell that many, at least in my short experience, like it ain't happening. So it's like, meanwhile, if it's like, well, we're going to get some, the darkest wax commander brown we can from CF Stead, put a lug sole on it, and then put like a thick leather midsole on it. The thing weighs like 7 pounds. Of course it's not mainstream. It's like, it's a super, hefty welted lace up shoe. Most people are like, what the hell is this thing? But our customers like, it's not heavy. They've got a pair of Knicks or Whites or something, and they're like, this stuff's actually, it's not that heavy, And so it's just like, it works for that customer. They wouldn't even hesitate to say something like that. Half the time we do a pre-order, they're like, can we do like a wedge, like penny loafer, like tassel, just crazy stuff. Right. And so it's like, that's definitely the customer, which it makes it fun too. Right. I mean, that makes it interesting. The biggest thing there is just trying to like make that work with our tanneries, and they help us as much as they can. Right. But at the end of the day, they're like, look, if you want to do this color, we have to run a drum of leather. Like, how leather is made. So like, what do you want us to do? We can't just give you 10 hides of everything, like you have to place a purchase order. We have to make it and ship it to you. So you can't just take 5 hides of this and that. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the hardest part. I mean, especially for those suppliers, it's like they want to support these smaller programs. And at this point too, it's like that those are the brands, even the well-known, whether Northampton brands or North American brands, like their orders are on the smaller side too, right? I mean, they're making a very niche product, right? And they're not huge runs of this and that. And so I think those we only work with, I mean, our main tanneries are, CF Stead, Horween, Incus out of Italy.
All legit tanneries.
Yeah. I mean, and all of them are like, they deal with brands, our size. I mean, some are bigger, some are smaller, sure. For sure. And it's like, so I mean, they're kind of in that, because I mean, the prices they're crazy for the hides. I mean, we always joke, like sometimes we'll get emails and stuff. They're like, hold on, $400 for what? Like, come on, this $400 is ridiculous. And it's like, you see, we have like this wallet sitting next to it with the same leather. It's like $230, right? And it's like, it's just the cost of, the stuff's expensive, right? The materials are expensive. So I think the tanneries, they're doing their best because they acknowledge that too. They know they can't sell that product to, brand X that is doing 200,000 pairs of product, right? Like it's too expensive. And so they're constantly trying to get creative too, to go, how can we support you guys without like, again, giving you 3 hides of some crazy suede color. And then, oh, Wyatt wants, some green kudu, like, okay, but you got to place a big enough order for us to produce the damn stuff, like, and so
Right.
I think it's, if anything, but I mean, over the years, you just kind of find ways to kind of, work with them and just try to do these fun, interesting things without driving them nuts,
Yeah, I mean, and I think too that's important to remind folks where the good stuff, like the good leather. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned CF Stead, Horween. I mean, these are essentially brands that are factories at the same time. I mean, they're not making private label stuff, but their name is so renowned that they are a brand in of itself. But like the skyrocketing cost increase on just leather. I mean, you've been in this business for a long time. I mean, how have you dealt with that? Because honestly, your prices haven't really gone too crazy. I mean, and let alone, we haven't even mentioned tariffs, right? So it's like, how have you been able to maintain this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, our prices, they'll get that out of the way so people aren't screaming in the headphones, but like our pricing has gone up, but I'll say, I mean, and I think a lot of brands honestly have this type of mindset when it comes to pricing. If you could sell it for less, you would, because you have existing customers, you have a customer base, that people who support and make your brand work, that have purchased something and they kind of like believe in the brand, without getting too cheesy about it. Like they believe in the brand and the product for that price point. And so if you could sell it for even $10 less or $50 less, it's not even a discussion. You would. You literally, you're basically setting your price at, we can survive at this rate, because we also understand we can sell more product and we have a larger customer pool the lower that price point is, right? And so it's very, there isn't a whole lot of upside in a market like ours, in my opinion, to just be like, oh, we'll just pad it an extra $50. The feedback and you have to really, really do, your homework before making that move, because it's not going to go well. It never does when you do a price increase or whatever. And so we look at it every year, and literally, if we don't have to do price increase, we don't, because if we do, there's going to be serious consequence to that, and there's nothing necessarily positive, at least in my experience, in doing that, other than it's just a requirement to continue moving forward. And so before Grant Stone and things that, maybe 15 years ago, a lot of those articles, percentage wise, talking big percentage increases over the last 10 to 15 years, but maybe not too different from the rest of the world with inflation, whether that's home prices 15 years ago, I guess oil's on its own path, but outside of cost of living and everything else, it's just very similar, because in the day, we got this interesting article about, the oil prices, and they're like, actually, from a manufacturer, producer, or brand standpoint, the biggest increase might just be in materials, not transit, not all this stuff, but just materials, because the cost of energy and everything else that happens, and all the, all the after effects from one issue. And so, it all goes up, but I guess we are all in the same boat to a certain extent, and so, that's the only way we can price things. And as I mentioned, first we started like the volumes and what we've sold and what we're making. Since we're, I still don't even feel like we're established necessarily with a great base of products and years and things like that. It's pretty difficult to go like, oh, this is the price, and we're just going to add a little more. I think if anything, any price, that's the only thing I can say about pricing is, anytime we increase it, it is, I basically see no other way to move forward without doing so, because I think if anything, it's not, you don't get a lot of great feedback with price increases, and I think that's kind of to be expected, because it's just not cheap.
I mean, but I also think there's two things that happen at price increases, and people don't always get it in the sense where I always look at brands like Rolex, to be honest with you, into which essentially almost every, if they do a price increase, it's at around the same time. It's usually the beginning of every year. They announce it ahead of time. And it's rarely a jaw-dropping increase. They basically have calculated internally that, like, look, this is where we feel our product is. And it's usually an inflation thing. In most cases, a raw material, whatever. But you're right. The cost of almost all goods has gone up. There's more people making stuff. There's more people trying to make stuff. And yeah, I mean, when you use quality materials, it's hard to maintain that price. But I also think there's a ton of other brands that do price increases and people are like, yeah, of course. No big deal. And I'm like, okay, so where's the disconnect where you're mad about this price increase, but you don't even mind that this other one went up? And some of those other brands, they're like, well, we just need a bigger ROI, Sure. And I always try to, and sometimes I do some of these lectures and I try to ask people, like, where do you think that's from? Like, and how is our own idea of like value perception being managed by this? Fine. Is it because they need to do that to pay their actor person an extra $2 million a year and fly them private to the fashion show? That might honestly be why, But I think there's stuff in there too where I think a lot of smaller brands wrestle with this, especially brands where, the founder feels like a friend and a person And, a friend of mine who's a small, well, not small, but he's like a business owner. And I remember he told me, he's like, the thing I've learned is he's like, people always want you to do well, but never better than them. And I'm like, oh, damn. Where it's like, look, for me, your product's gone up, but I'll be honest, the price of Alden and Edward Green has gone up. In my case of Alden, like, dude, I returned the shoe. I'm like, that's not brown. That's not chocolate suede.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it gets to that point. I'll say though, I mean, it's hard because I think sometimes we have to, I mean, especially our customer service, and people who are, on our team, we have to take the, you want to listen to feedback and stuff. Obviously that's very important. I think the social comments, social media, maybe not, they don't hold as much weight necessarily because you could create, the greatest, I forgot what brand it was. This was car related. And like, it doesn't matter what they post, right? You just get decimated. But a lot of it at this point, everyone just has fun. Like who can make the funniest, most mean comment basically on everything. But it's like, you get that a lot. But I mean, at the end of the day, like our product, I think it's very straightforward. The pricing it's nothing crazy. It isn't just based on, like, again, if you buy a wallet or a bag, like you mentioned some of the, I mean, true fashion brands that are legacy brands like a YSL. I mean, their calf loafers probably $1,500. And
crazy.
It's literally welted in Italy and like what, it's a 6.5 markup, whatever. Like, but that is their business model. And it's the only way for them to survive, right? Because they're, doing billions and whatever, and they live in a very unique space. But so I think in our world, it's all pretty. I mean, our customers today, most of them still find our product to be it's hard to say it's not good value for the components and fit in the product you're getting with the price that it is today. I mean, all things relative,
Yeah, but I think for me too, the other thing to distinguish, like where I think sometimes people start with you guys because they feel like, oh, this is the best brand for the value. But for me, in many ways, I also think it's just the best brand. Like I don't, and I think too, where I'm one of those people where sometimes if I spend a ton of money for something, I actually almost never really enjoy it because of the cost. The barrier to entry was so high that I feel like I can only, I can only use it on special occasions, or this is, I only wear this at this time, and it just and I'm like, well, I'm not really enjoying it. Like it sits, it doesn't get use, and I mean, you're the stuff you make it's made to wear, and it's made to continue wearing and be repaired and wear again. And this isn't like put it away and you can only wear it, once a year.
For sure. And I mean, there's so many things like that, right? Where it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, there's a great point there as far as like that barrier to entry, and then you spend the money on it. And also like it makes you feel, you're almost proud of that product or whatever when you go buy something.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a consumer as well, and will buy things like that sometimes. And yeah, I mean, as long as you're like, yeah, this is something that, it was worth my money, whatever that means, right? It's different to everyone, but
Sure.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's what I hope that, I mean, I think that's our goal. I mean, long-term is, I mean, I hate talking about the price of the product and saying it's a good value. To me, it's such a non-starter. It's like,
Yeah.
it's the worst thing in the world. We never talk about, well, this is how much it costs us. Here's our margin because we're direct to consumer. It only costs us this much.
I think it's
I'm
so
like,
tacky. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense for certain products and whatever. It doesn't make sense for us. It just doesn't. You're basically saying, well, we're just cheaper than the other people. And I know we'll lose in that battle, most of the time. And like, that just can't be where, our focus has to be. It's like, hey, let's make something really cool. Last few products we made that came out, I think I was happy to see that, because we've gone a while where for a minute there, I'm like, what is that next thing to keep things fun and also very interesting and keep people engaged, and also like just make something that's fucking cool, and just
Yeah.
get excited about, like get excited about and still be somewhat on brand a little bit. And like when that product hits and it does well and it kind of achieves those things to a certain level, you're like, I mean, that's what makes sense. That's better than any ad campaign you could ever do. It's just create a cool fucking product, versus, hey, buy another, brown diesel boot from us. Like, yes, that's helps, keep people here and allows us to buy shoe boxes and whatever. But, I think all of that combined with that price at the end of the day too, we're at that price too, where it's like, hey, if people are going to pay that price too, our customer service and stuff has to be on top of it as well. So people have problems, whatever, like, no, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about that. It's not like buying a, let's say $100 item or $200 item where it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like a buy it and you're kind of on your own type of deal. And understandably so, where it's like, hey, well, if you're asking this much for your product, you better be able to support it too, and support that person and no hesitation type of thing. And so, yeah, we're learning that aspect as well to make sure that, we're kind of aligned on all those aspects,
Yeah, I mean, I think too, just making cool product. I mean, for me, when we were talking, like I have wanted a black suede loafer for a very long time, and a thin. When I did made to measure shoes for myself, I tried to make this, and there's a CF Stead, like deep black suede. I mean, there's also but like I wanted all black, but suede, and not gray suede. So much that I remember buying this shoe, and it's funny. There's two other people I know who were trying to make it, and they would buy it from somewhere else and then just dye it because no one was making it like black, and we did it, and it looks awesome. It is the perfect shoe. I'm wearing it. Well, I'm wearing it right now, but we're a shoes off house, which is a separate story, and so it's upstairs by the door. But like, it's the best, and I'm just being able to make stuff that's cool and stuff that and it's not so much like Wonka factory ideas, right? I mean, you're not like, let's completely flip this on its head and do something bizarro. It's just like, no, this is a great, simple, elegant makeup, and there's no bells and whistles, but it is the thing that people have been wanting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good. I think it's a good way to put it. I mean, there's a lot of times there's a way to do something like totally, recreate the whole product and make it kind of wild and this and that. But at the same time, there's so many different variations of a simple product that sometimes, doing something that's just relatively core with a small adjustment, that's kind of where you might land most of the time and be like, well, this is going to be my go-to for a very long time. It's kind of like a core product with a small adjustment based on how you wear something, So yeah, I literally wear suede loafers, I don't know, 80, 90% of the time, around the year. And yeah, having that and then throw a rubber sole on it just makes it, if you're traveling, if you're doing whatever, like you're never going to run into a scenario like, well, I can't wear this. It's going to be a problem or whatever. So it's just a very versatile product, and again, it's going to come down to your personal preference and everything else. But yeah, it is nice when you take something that's pretty straightforward, you just make it a small adjustment and you're like, yeah, that's it,
Yeah. And I think too, I was telling a friend and I was like, oh yeah, it's suede loafer. And he was like, suede, but aren't you worried about it getting wet? And I was like, do you got 20 minutes to sit down?
Yeah.
This right. is not a thing. This has never been a thing.
Yeah. And like over the years, it's hard, because, and I think today, not today, but like, I guess over the last couple of decades, right? There are a lot of different types of suedes and the way tannages work and whatever else. There's a lot of levels there. But if you're talking about a CF Stead suede, whether that's Janus Butt, Janus Calf, Rapello, they're tannages. So something you're buying on a Crockett, something you're buying on ours, something you're buying from an Alden, something you're buying, I'm assuming from Allen Emmons or whatever these companies are, you're good. You're good. Like if anything, you can beat the hell out of the thing and it's going to look better than most full grain because it just doesn't saturate as much. And so it doesn't change. Even if you get it completely soaking wet, people are like, oh, you get like water spots. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I wear my suedes like all winter long in the salt and snow. And I can dress them up with a suit like 2 years later and no one would bat an eye, where I think sometimes a full grain, if anything, requires a little more TLC over the months and years and stuff. Suede is especially that level of suede. And I'm sure there's other tanneries too. And Italy has a handful of really good suede tanneries that a lot of footwear brands are using. That same thing. They're good. They're very good. The tannages are good. The color, the dyes are good, and yeah, they react really, really well. But especially like I said, the CF Stead stuff. The water pretty much beats up on it, and yeah, in the color fade, if anything, depending on the color, it just looks very natural and isn't it? It doesn't create like some eyesore type of thing. It just looks like a natural little fade and it looks great, Yeah,
I think that's the thing too, where, yeah, again, like there's just so many like dumb, stereotypes and rumors that where it's like, well, wait, no, like I'll be honest, all my shoes that have lasted the longest have been suede. I have a very old shoe that I got off of eBay. It was a Brooks Brothers Alden, basically, that I got off eBay in maybe 2006 or so. And I couldn't afford a nice dress shoe. I needed a nice dress shoe. And I was basically like, oh, I'll just search Brooks Brothers. I found it. It's the Snap Last, which I don't know if any heads out there are into it, but it was somewhat of a narrow heel. It's almost kind of like the modified, whatever, but it's a chocolate suede shoe. I've had that shoe resold probably 4 times. I'm not going to exaggerate, but yeah, so like about 4 times. The suede looks great. It's a little bit, sort of the neck is a little longer here and there, but it's just like, yeah. And I've worn it in the snow. It gets rain on it. I have the Grant Stone when you did like a sand suede loafer. It was like the first pair I got from you. I've worn that in the rain and it's fine. I've cleaned them under the sink with I got that, what is it? The only time I cleaned them, I think was it the Saphir sort of little suede cleaner.
Yeah.
Dumped the thing on it, scrub it, left it out to dry, it was fine. And they're great. So for me, I more or less will almost always exclusively choose suede over calf. forever.
Well, especially the day to day. I mean, it really depends on what people are doing and kind of what their job is and everything else. But it's like, especially if you're doing a lot of, I mean, it's more or less office style work, and it's pretty casual. I mean, suede is also incredibly comfortable, so that's the kind of the first part of it that goes. But someone mentioned this on my team because they're writing a newsletter about suede the other day. It was more like suede care, and they were like, there was this episode of Seinfeld back in the day where Jerry got a new suede jacket. And he wore it in the rain and somewhat even damaged it or whatever, right? And so, it's just things like that where it's just a skit from Seinfeld where it's like that could, really, I mean, how many people know that and have seen that over the years, right? Millions of people, right? So it's like, it's things like that where, and again, suedes, not all suedes are equal, that is for sure. And so, maybe a $3,000, Chanel suede jacket isn't treated the same way because it's not meant to be a beater, potentially. I'm assuming may not be treated the same way as, a Crockett and Jones like brogue boot with suede, and how that could handle it. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But it's funny you'd mentioned the Seinfeld thing. Because that's still something that sits in the back of my head where, it's like, oh, you can't get it wet. Oh no.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's amazing.
Well, we're starting to wrap. But like, what other, myths do you think are fair to dispel that of the constant, questions and stuff you get hit up? Like, do you believe that cordovan genuinely is the best thing for footwear, or is that also kind of, because I will be honest, for me, cordovan is hard. It's so hard to break in. I admire it, but I've been like, well, let's go with suede.
Yeah, that one to me, it I mean, I feel like if there was like a final, like jury of this is exactly what that answer is. I mean, I feel like it's just personal because, to your point, I don't even like wearing boots because of like something on my leg or whatever near like the middle of the ankle, whatever. If it's shell cordovan, I don't even want it. No way. It's super uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And so like I'll wear shell penny loafers, especially the unlined versions and stuff. I really, really think those are amazing. It's definitely one of my favorite materials because of the smell of the hides. And the shells, just the way that it wears over time. It's probably one of my favorite for sure. But this guy took his class from a long time ago, a bespoke bootmaker, but he did like Western bespoke stuff, primarily that and dress. He hated shell cordovan, literally hated it. He was like, "This is dumbest thing ever." It's terrible to work with. This is what happens to it. It doesn't breathe. Like I mean, he was being, at that point, you could tell he just wanted to rant, but he hated shell cordovan to work with it as someone who's like a bespoke bootmaker. And so I get that point too, or I remember someone from Standard and Strange over the years, one of the owners was like, it makes no sense to make engineer boots in shell. Like they don't breathe. Like it's super uncomfortable. It's the dumbest material ever for an engineer boot. Yet like all of his customers want it. Stuff. He always tells them like, no, we're not going to do any more of those. It's terrible. And so, it just kind of depends on the product, right? Like, and what it is. But like, to me, like, Alden's Colorate, long wing or penny loafer, like to me, that always will stand out as being like probably one of the most versatile products you can wear, or even something that we make like the natural shell cordovan boots or natural shell cordovan penny loafer. It's just, to me, it's just one of my favorites. The garnet shell penny loafer. Those are really hard to replicate with calf. It's really hard to replicate that look with like a garnet shell. Even the dark cognac from Horween, that shell cordovan will do that, like a penny loafer and stuff like that. That also is really hard to replicate with calf. So it just totally depends on application. I feel like, but I really enjoy it, even though the price is pretty insane, over the last so many years. But it's pretty special stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I have a pair of cigar shell, which is that's my favorite color. I mean, for me, deep browns or black, has always been kind of my shoe favorite color. And I mean, it's a great looking shoe. And now I think maybe it was COVID, I'll be honest with you, because I was wearing like house shoes so much, and they're like it's like a Birkenstock, clog. And I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, that like my foot had changed, because essentially for almost like 2 years I was wearing these clogs more and more, and it's like the width of my foot changed, and I don't know, I tried to put them on, I was like, oh my god, these don't fit anymore. But I'm like, I got to keep them,
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, it's a weird. It's like a Ralph. It's probably a Crockett shoe, but I have those that like I'll just keep almost like a baseball card, where it's like, nah, like it's still a cool, wild looking shoe. I'll be honest, the colors from Cordovan are crazy, but I don't think I ever wore that shoe longer than a few hours because I would be so uncomfortable I have to take it off.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of our most popular releases ever, I mean, it was small quantities, but it went so quickly, was black marbled gel Cordovan from Halloween. And like, I have a pair in penny loafer, an unlined penny loafer in black marbled. And so it's basically like a black emerald green with brown undertone.
Wow.
And it's one of the coolest freaking shoes, right? So I wear this thing all the time. But I mean, they're a nightmare to make because half the people get them and they're like, well, I want a little darker, I want lighter, the left and right. And it's like, yeah, they'll never match, right? They're not even close. They're wildly different. Yeah. They're nuts. I have a pair of boots in here, a photo sample. I mean, these things are crazy looking. It looks like people are
going to be like, oh, these are mismatched.
Yeah. Yeah. Every single pair. Right. And so, but things like that, I mean, they're really fun. They're fun to do things like that. It's just kind of a pain,
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Well, this was great. Wyatt, thank you so much for joining us. Before we wrap, though, is there anything you want to add or mention that I didn't discuss? Or
no, not that I think of. Just thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and congrats to you for 10 years. Very cool.
Man, you too.
Yeah,
this is I'm excited to get more of these loafers out there for folks. But Wyatt, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, man. Talk to you soon.
No, thank you.